I just want to start by, if you didn't hear us before, just by welcoming you back. Thanks so much for joining us again. As you can see, I'm here with the guys in person, which is really exciting. We had an event last night over in Oakland, which was one of our full scale events. If you haven't, I think many of you, if not all of you, have attended those in the past, but we did the wines of Dante's Inferno. So tasted through 9 wines and 9 levels of hell, and we're still here to tell the tale. So I'm here. I'm really excited to be here. We're in
Speak for yourself.
Benicia. Yeah, exactly. Benicia, California today. So we're so excited to have you for the Goddess and the Grape, the wines of Demeter. And we're going to turn things over right now to Ryan, who will kick it off. Tell us about the first wine.
Absolutely. And I just want to make sure everyone can hear us all right. I just want to make sure we're all good. Perfect. That's a great thumbs up. That's what we'd like to hear. Perfect. Great. Yes. So thanks, Jeff. We are extremely glad to have you here in person. It's been a long time.
Yes.
So
Too long.
I thought I bought a first class ticket, but I'm here in coach with these guys.
We are actually all wearing Aloha shirts not solidarity, but actually these are all gifts from Jeff, believe it or not. So we have a tailor to thank for this today.
Very glad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we'll get started here on the first wine. So the first wine of the night is from a winery in Turkey called Kavaklidere. This is the 2019 Kavaklidere Yakut, and this is a blend of Öküzgözü and Bogazkere, as well as 2 other international varieties, or French varieties, as often it's called, Carignan and Alicante Boucher. But the primary grapes here are Öküzgözü and Bogazkere. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about about the label and about the history kind of behind this wine here. So there's actually a relief on the front here that you can see on the bottle that has a depiction of there's 2 guys actually on there. There's one large guy and one small guy. And on the right is actually depicted a Hittite king from the 8th century BCE, King Warpalawas. And next to him is the storm god, Tarhunzas. So the king's hands are out in a gesture of either greeting, worship, or gratitude. There's some debate as to exactly what his kind of gestures are doing there. This relief is actually from an 8th century stone relief, a Hittite stone relief in southern Anatolia and southern Turkey, called the Ivriz relief. It's a very, very important relief. It's actually located just next to the source of one of the more important rivers in southern Turkey. So just a funny little anecdote that the importer and distributor, great guy named Karasi, was telling us about the Turkish side importer of this wine, man named Mehmet. He said that Mehmet was saying that his friends, when he was young, actually shot off the nose of the god Tarhunzas on this stone relief, and he actually spent some time in Turkish jail for it. So there's actually a little bit of connection between this wine and a bit of the ancient history there of southern Turkey. But oftentimes it's the nose that gets it on stone relief, on statues.
The Sphinx, right?
Yeah, the Sphinx. Something that's shooting off noses. It's just people just can't resist.
So it's only if they're big like mine. That's the real danger. Yeah.
But so this is a wine from one of the oldest and best known wineries in Turkey. Kavaklidere is a large winery, 653 hectares, which is somewhere around 1,200, 1,300 acres. So they're a large winery founded in 1929. And it's a winery that actually has 3 different wineries located around Turkey. So they have one on the west coast, closer to Ankara, one on the eastern side, and one kind of on the sort of the southern central sort of part of Turkey as well. This one is from from grapes that are actually on 2 sides of Turkey. So you have grapes from the Aegean, the west coast, and you also have some grapes coming from the vineyards inland near Elazig in eastern Anatolia. Those grapes are the Öküzgözü and Bogazkere. Öküzgözü is a red grape, kind of a medium-bodied red grape typically. What it does is it provides the kind of the lift, the aromatics, the fruit, the softness for the wine. It's something that you don't see on its own very often because it can be a little bit perfumey, a little powerful aromatically. So oftentimes it's blended with Bogazkere. Bogazkere translates to throat burner. So you might guess that it actually provides a good bit of structure, tannin, acidity, and on its own, Bogazkere can be a wine that's very powerful, like a Bordeaux or like a Burgundy, a good Barolo, Brunello di Montalcino, something like that. But when blended together, you can actually make these really lovely, kind of more sort of medium-bodied, but very fresh red wines, like the Yakut here. Yakut actually means ruby in Turkish, and it's all stainless steel. There's no oak on this wine. Very bright, clean, fresh. A lot of really kind of beautiful blackberry, cherry, little floral tones there. That's from the Öküzgözü. If I was going to blind taste this wine, I would probably go somewhere like a good Beaujolais Village or a Cru Beaujolais, something that has a bit of structure, but there's still that kind of like bouncy, fun lift to the fruit. It's something that's really, really elegant. Yeah, something you could stick in the fridge, something that you could chill for a hot summer day. It's very food friendly. Obviously, you could imagine roast chicken, roast vegetables. I mean, it's a very versatile wine, something you could just really have available for almost any occasion. But yeah, this is the wine that we chose. We chose to start in Turkey for the goddess and the grape, the wines of Demeter, mainly because of that historical connection for the mother goddess, going back to the roots. Where does Demeter come from? Why do we see this mother goddess sort of figure come through? We see things like fertility figurines at Çatalhöyük, and going throughout history. I mean, like that's Dana has a great deal of experience, kind of like digging through some of the more kind of the Hittite Empire and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll say a cautionary note right at the beginning that whenever anybody says something is religious or it's ceremonial in archaeology, that's really code for we don't fully understand what's going on there. So yeah, case in point, I mean, we kind of dive into this club looking at these mother goddess figurines, which are found at Çatalhöyük really early on, right? We're talking about 7,000 BCE, which is essentially right before the transition from the Neolithic into the Chalcolithic. And these figurines are really interesting. I mean, they are, kind of they're made out of different materials for one thing, but they all kind of symbolize the same thing. This feminine figure with large breasts, big hips, attributes that we normally might think are associated with fertility and childbirth. So that's kind of how they've been described in the past. But the truth is we see this motif in many different places at many different times, even in Europe as early as 35,000 years ago, carved out of mammoth bones. So, it's really, it's a hot topic of debate, especially in these early periods about what exactly is going on. But yeah, typically these are sort of ascribed to be linked to apotropy, magic, fertility, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually, the Hittites too. I mean, with this relief, they had a really interesting goddess. She was a goddess of fertility. Her name was Arena. She's the sun goddess, and she, like Demeter, was an extremely powerful goddess. We see that emphasis, when we look at Demeter, really causing the entire Greek pantheon to fall to its knees by stopping the entire agricultural cycle. And similarly, Arena, she actually has a consort. He's weather god. He's very, minor. He's, he's the weather. She's the sun, and is responsible really for the entire agricultural cycle, just like Demeter. So it's kind of a cool connection with the Hittite Empire for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's where we kick things off. And then, of course, we have to move to Greece. So for the next wine, we're actually going to move on to the second wine from the club.
That's kind of it.
The 2017 Anatolikos Limnio. And I'm going to pass that over to Jeff, who will be able to tell us a bit more about that. And give us a rundown on wine number 2 here. We'll finish our tastings here, but we'll let Jeff start us off.
Thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely.
So this is a wine. If you have this open, if you've just opened it, you may notice a little bit of a kind of a funkiness to it. Maybe it's something that'll blow off. So this is a wine. If you end up with more of it, you want to open it, maybe an hour or so before you're going to drink it. Just kind of give it a little air. To me, it's it's actually a really pleasing smell, because it kind of represents, you can kind of smell the terroir and the winemaking style in there. It's a very natural kind of wine. But if you're getting a kind of like little bit of almost like a little funkiness, like an acetone or something like that. It'll blow off. Just needs a little bit of time. So as Ryan mentioned, this is 100% Limnio from Anatolikos vineyards in Thrace. So that's in northeastern Greece. And Limnio is an incredibly fascinating grape. It's actually the oldest named variety in the world. So it's mentioned in Homer. It's not called Limnio, but Homer says that Agamemnon and his troops, as they were preparing for a day of fighting while they were besieging Troy, received a shipment of Lemnian wine, which they proceeded to get drunk on before getting up the next day hungover. Maybe that's why it took them 10 years to take the city. I don't know.
Smells like courage.
But so this wine is mentioned in Homer, who's writing in around the 8th century BCE. And it comes up also in Aristotle, who calls Lemnia his favorite wine. So this is an incredibly ancient variety. I mean, we think, we can't prove decisively that it's exactly the same DNA, but it seems likely. So this wine is coming from Lemnos. That gives us the name Limnio ultimately. So actually, the grape Limnio isn't grown much on Lemnos anymore. It's grown primarily there's a kind of a 3-pronged peninsula that sticks out from northern Greece called Chalkidiki, which is one of the areas, and then also in Thrace. So the Anatolikos vineyard is located in Thrace. It's about 3 miles from the sea. The area is really hot and humid in the summer and can be very rainy, but it's got this moderating influence from the Aegean Sea. So the vineyard's about 3 miles kind of up on the hillside from the Aegean. So it's grown this wine is grown in sandy soil, so well draining soils. It's vinified entirely naturally, so no intervention, no filtering, no fining, and then they age it in for 12 months in oak barrels. So the grape Limnio has it's generally a fairly high acid wine, has pretty strong tannins, and you see that a lot with kind of high tannin wines that oak aging can help kind of soften those out and smooth those out. So you'll see that kind of when we put it in our mouth. So yeah, I've tried a lot of wine and I love this grape. We used a different Limnio when we did the Wines of the Odyssey. It was Wines of the Odyssey.
We did Limnion.
Yeah, Limnion. It was a different. Yeah, Limnion was the name of the producer, which kind of a play on the Limnion. But this is the second one of these we've kind of played with in our clubs and events, and it's just an amazing wine. Kind of on the nose. Well, actually, looking at the wine before we even put it in the nose, I mean, it's ruby color, but I think you'll see it's got like a kind of an orange tint to it, and it's really brickish colored. And this tends to be, especially kind of on the edge, and this tends to be like Ryan mentioned, kind of, when you're dealing with obscure varieties like this, you're like, well, what would I blind taste this as? If I thought I was getting something conventional, just looking at that, I'm like, that has to be Nebbiolo. That's like the classic marker of Nebbiolo is that brickish color. And it happens very quickly in the aging process with Nebbiolo. And so this is a 2017 wine, and so again, but the comparison doesn't stop there. I mean, I kind of smell it. I smell this kind of black tea and a little bit of cola, cherry, cranberry. It's got a lot of really nice kind of baking spices, like a little bit of sweetness from almost like a butterscotch smell to me. And then I think the primary, the kind of primary smell for me is like a bay leaf, which is often used to characterize this wine. Like thyme, oregano. It's an incredibly intricate nose, I would say. So we taste it. And again, it's got all those same things, and you can feel the smoothness on the palate, but then it's backed up by a really nice kind of tannic structure, but not overwhelming. So that's where, you know, that influence of 12 months of oak really softens that out. And it lingers a lot in your mouth, which I love, that kind of long finish. Like you feel like you're enjoying the wine well after you've kind of sipped on it. So again, I think, you know, if you were going to compare this to something more known, Nebbiolo definitely, and possibly Sangiovese as well. It just, it has a kind of, you know, a refined Italian wine kind of feel to it. So I think that, you know, if we're looking for things to pair this with, I think you can kind of go in that same direction. So like lasagna would be an amazing pairing. Anything that has a kind of savory element to it, like wild game, you know, like a rabbit stew or kind of ragu. And then that, just the pairing, you know, Sangiovese or Nebbiolo with pizza, spaghetti, that kind of acidity matches, where you have the acidity of the wine matching the acidity of the acidity of the tomato sauce. So and then one of the guys that put in the write-up, like spanakopita, which is a kind of spinach pie, again, which has that just really savory element with the cheese in there. So people, you know, usually blend Limnio, usually blend it to kind of add that kind of just, oh man, that je ne sais quoi to Grenache or Cabernet Sauvignon or other varieties, but incredibly rare on its own. And so yeah, I mean, this is maybe it's because it's my wine to describe it. Definitely my favorite wine in the lineup. So cheers.
It's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's remarkably balanced as well,
Yeah.
right? In terms of the acidity, in terms of the fruit, it just really is this humming. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And it was grape that I believe was actually was kind of close to extinction for a while, where there was very little. I mean, Greece kind of went through this sort of kind of dark age of wine where there really wasn't much interest in developing the domestic market there, or developing the viticulture. It was kind of stuck really in this sort of stasis for a long time, especially in the 20th century. You know, post World War I, post World War II, these are obviously like really tough times for Greece, and so it was you know, trying to figure out which these native varieties to keep, to work with. Limnio was many sources claim that it was almost essentially extinct, but fortunately, I mean, it's something that you know, there's at least, I think you're saying about 10 vineyards,
less than 10 producers.
Yeah,
less than
like
10 producers of this wine. So it's something that's relatively rare. It has a beautiful history to it, but I mean, I think it's just a really compelling wine.
Yeah, oldest named variety in the world. You know,
Yeah,
pretty cool. Sure.
Yeah, and if you ever been to one of our events, you definitely had Limnio before, because I think it was Heracles as well, maybe.
Oh, I think we did use that.
The wines and labors of Heracles. Yeah, I do
That's
actually.
right,
I do remember working through those. Yeah,
Favorite.
but yeah, I mean, speaking of you know, just like modernizing kind of like changes in Greek wine, I think, like, you know, we actually, you know, that's something that we kind of butt up against a lot. We're saying, is this an old school kind of a more rustic style Greek wine, or is it something that's kind of developing, it's kind of maturing, I think.
And it's so great to see these different producers, right? And even these classic blends, like, I mean, even the you know, the Öküzgözü Bogazkere blend that you have, right? Some of you might remember the Sevelin wine that we used before is a blend of those, right, as well. So to see the variance and just to kind of experience the breadth of, you know, what these varietals and blends have to offer.
Indigenous varieties. I mean, precisely. I mean, I know in Turkey they have over 600 indigenous varieties, and that's just you know, on record. You know, it's, and I know in Greece, Italy, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these indigenous varieties that are they express themselves so differently. So yeah, it's something I'm pretty sure I speak for all of us when that's one of the most fun parts of this whole project, is just getting to explore some of these grapes that are almost always
rediscovering.
Rediscovering, I should say, for ourselves, but also for some of these other places.
Yeah, and the other Limnio we had, the Limnion was done in a much more kind of modern style, more oak, more, I guess, a little bit fuller bodied. I think it was a little bit, just had a little more roundness to it. And I love, like, when you can combine this kind of traditional, a wine that tastes really traditional and like from the place, but with really good winemaking. So you're not losing any of the, you know, you're not losing anything of the grape. It's kind of quality. So
Totally.
Yeah, good stuff.
All right.
All right, turn it over to Dana then.
I think it's actually on tea.
Oh, tea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect.
All right, so for the next wine, we have the 2020 Markou eMeis. And we picked this wine because it's in Attica, Greece, but it is near Eleusis. And this is where the goddess Demeter went after her daughter was kidnapped by Hades, and her daughter Persephone was kidnapped by Hades and brought to the underworld. And this wine is just produced just east of where Eleusis is. And Eleusis is actually, in the ancient world, one of the most important temples for Demeter. And this wine is made from 50% Agiorgitiko and 50% Mandilaria. Both varieties are native to Greece. Agiorgitiko is the most widely planted red grape variety in Greece, actually, even planted more than Xenomavro. Agiorgitiko has ties, a lot of ties to mythology. It was in the Maya. It's nicknamed the blood of Heracles or Hercules because legend has it that Heracles drank wine made from Agiorgitiko after he slayed the Nemean lion there. Also, Karen McNeil in the Wine Bible says that Agiorgitiko might have been one of the favorite varieties of Agamemnon, actually. So. Mandilaria is also a native variety, and it's a little bit more light-skinned, a little lighter bodied, used to give wines a little bit of lift, and so it's usually blended, actually. You don't often see it on its own. And just to harken back to what Ryan was saying, this wine kind of represents where Greece winemaking is going. Ryan talked about the dark ages of Greek winemaking, where people were ripping up native varieties like Mandilaria or Limnio to plant Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, things that they thought was going to sell better on the international market. And even then, when they kept native varieties, they tended to blend it together with other varieties, just thinking that, oh, it'll make a better wine. There was a complete lack of confidence in the varieties they had and the history of winemaking they had in Greece. This wine, it's made with fermented carbonically, carbonic maceration. If many of you had Beaujolais, is Gamay grapes are made in this style, and all that means is that instead of pressing all the grapes and letting them sit with the juice of the grapes, they take just clusters of grapes and just throw them into a stainless steel tank, and so the weight of the grapes from the top press down the bottom, so those get pressed, but depending on where the grapes are in the tank, the top grapes don't get crushed. So as a result, the juice, the yeast begin to feed on the sugars in the grapes, and then this actually starts the fermentation. But then the top grapes are still whole, and so it's a slower process of fermentation, and the result is a fresher style wine. And this wine is made in that style. And just like most Beaujolais, we recommend you throw this in the fridge for maybe 20 minutes, serve it a little slightly, especially in the warmer summer months, slightly chilled. It's really nice, refreshing. And when I taste it, I get a lot of blueberry, kind of little raspberry, like kind of underripeness to it, and a hint of pepper. And it's really bright. I think it would go really well with like lighter chicken dishes, like a kind of grilled chicken salad, Caesar salad, or lettuce wraps, etc. And this style of carbonic maceration from two indigenous variety, you would not see this, say, 20 years ago, because this kind of represents going back to the varieties, native varieties, and fusing it with modern techniques like carbonic maceration. And instead of trying to please everyone, they're focusing more on markets that appreciate these kinds of wines. I feel like just like a DJ, where if a DJ at a prom, you try to like please everyone, you're gonna end up pleasing nobody,
Right,
you
right.
know.
Yeah.
Versus
That's a
like
good point.
you focus on your certain markets, your certain niche markets, and you kind of make a name for yourself, and you kind of push the envelope forward, and leads to innovation and whatnot.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, carbonic maceration is something that's definitely, it's not controversial by any means, but it's something that is, kind of not being maybe a little bit rediscovered, where it was something that was, you almost only saw it being used in Beaujolais with the kind of the younger styles of Beaujolais and Beaujolais Village. And then now you're seeing it used actually in the Cru Beaujolais, so Morgon, Brouilly, these Fleury, these a little bit more serious styles of Beaujolais. But it's now a style that you're seeing people use on any kind of grape. We have folks here in California, Oregon, and I've had carbonic macerated Mourvèdre. I've had Albarino, which is a white grape, a Spanish white grape. There's a lot of experimentation being done with this process, because what it does is it really, it softens the wine. It results in a softer wine because you're not breaking the skins, the fermentation, this intracellular fermentation. You're not extracting as much tannin. And I think it's so cool to T said 20 years ago, you never seen this wine. I don't think you would have seen this wine, 5 or 10 years ago in a lot of places. Carbonically macerated, Agiorgitiko Mandilaria is about as dorky as it gets in a lot of circles. And it's so wonderful for us to be able to just, to go through a distributor or importer book and it's there. This is something that is really an embarrassment of riches. And so, speaking of dark ages, this for me represents a golden age for not only Greek wine, but for wine in general, really. I mean, the availability of wine is just, this is a much larger conversation, but it's just wonderful. I mean, the fact that we can just open up any book and just be able to find something unique and interesting and historic is wonderful.
And it really speaks to, it's so approachable too, right? It's one of these things where, you, as you mentioned, this is as geeky as it gets in terms of, varietals and location and vinification, but it's something that, if you've never tasted this before, it's just going to appeal to you. You were so right about it being fresh on the palate, and it's a hot day here in Benicia, and we actually slightly chilled this, and it's just delightful. Really, really gorgeous. So.
Yeah. And Agiorgitiko usually it's a much bigger, fuller, kind of dark wine. And so this style allows that really kind of primary fruit flavor to come through. You're not lost in anything. You just kind of like drinking kind of delicious alcoholic fruit, really, it's really good.
But not without complexity.
It's good.
It does have there's a lot of nuance to it. Like you were saying, I kind of like cranberry, kind of like darker sort of fruits, little pepper sort of notes there. It's still really compelling.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
And I would say it's just really exciting when you look at Greek importers. I would say, Ryan and I have been, and then Dana and Jeff, we've been in the wine industry each for like over 10 years. And just seeing when I first started, you look at a Greek importer book and it would say, like Chardonnay, like Cab, Syrah, and you're just thinking, well, we have all that in California, or we can get those varieties from France. Like, I don't understand, who's gonna, why? I want something that's
something
good.
local.
Local.
Have some Retsina. You're like, no, thank you.
I want Mandilaria.
No offense to the Retsina.
Actually, I think it was only about 10 years ago. I remember one of the first Greek wines I tasted was a sample that somebody had brought in, and they to the wine shop, and what they had done is they had grown Agiorgitiko in Nemea, and they fermented it, put it in a large, essentially plastic bladder, put it on a boat, shipped it over to California, and then blended it with California Cabernet Sauvignon.
Amazing.
Which I had never had a wine that was blended of 2 countries before, and it was one of those which at the time was very surprising to me, and I really haven't had many since, but. They're actually, the wine was pretty awful, but it was one of those things where that was, I would like to believe that was kind of the end of this this Greek kind of holding on to the maybe they just want more Cabernet. I don't know, but I mean now we see these wonderful 100% Agiorgitikos that are doing they're doing great things with the grape. But yeah, we've come a long way even in the last 10 years really.
Yeah. Cheers.
First Agiorgitiko I tried was actually grown on the property of the University of California, Berkeley, believe it or not. Our professor Stephen Miller actually was excavating at Nemea, the Panhellenic site, and they had to buy the property. So if you go, I think to this day to Nemea, you'll see sections of property that say property of the Regents of the University of California. But he brought in Agiorgitiko that was just, it really makes you stand up and pay attention. This was years and years ago. And just to see how far things have come is remarkable.
Yeah. Well, I think for the next wine, we're gonna venture back to Turkey for the first of the two wines that we had offered for club members to purchase that were not officially club wines, but they were wines that we love them so much. We taste a lot of wines when we're doing the research for the club, and they're wines that we always fall in love with. And it's there's three wines we have to pick, and so some come in the second and third place slots in terms of what we need to fill out the club. Doesn't mean that they're second or third place in quality.
Not at all.
So this is a rosé from Kavaklidere as well. The 2019 Lal Rosé from Kavaklidere, and it's a dry rosé, and this is made from a grape called Karasi. Karasi is a grape that it's interesting. It's primarily used for rosé, almost exclusively. I haven't really seen any instances where it's done as a single red varietal, although it is a red variety. Karasi basically means Karasi from Chal. Chal is a place, and Karasi is the name of the grape. So this is a wine that comes from Denizli in Western Turkey, also in the Aegean, towards the Aegean coast as well. It's definitely similar to, if you're going to describe it as in comparative terms, to something akin to a Southern French rosé, though I don't know if I would say Provence personally. It reminds me more of some of the Languedoc rosés, or some of the little bit fuller bodied rosés of Southern Rhone or something like that. It's not quite as delicate as a Provence rosé for me, which makes sense. It's a different grape. It's a different style. But it's a really, really versatile wine, and being able to taste Karasi is just awesome. Another one of those absolutely kind of obscure varieties. There's actually probably a more famous variety in Turkey called Kalicik Karasi, which I'm seeing more and more talk about it. It's showing up on certain wine lists at fancy restaurants in New York. It's getting more and more press, and this Kalicik Karasi is kind of being described as like the Pinot Noir of indigenous varieties of Turkey.
Also showed up in an Ancient Wines Club.
Exactly. Right. See, we've done a Kalicik Karasi as well.
It's been discovered.
It has been discovered.
For those of you taking notes,
yes,
you've definitely had it.
Easter egg.
So again, development here in terms of the wine market, and in terms of also wine production. So there's over 600 varieties of indigenous varieties in Turkey, as I mentioned, and I think again, we're just speaking of the golden ages and dark ages. Turkey is in a bit of a strange place in terms of its modern winemaking history. So Kavaklidere has been around since 1929. Obviously, Turkey has gone through significant changes since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and what we kind of see now is that Turkey is a bit stuck in terms of its winemaking, not necessarily culture, but industry. You have some very large wineries like Kavaklidere and other kind of more state-sponsored, state-backed wineries. This is based in Ankara, so there's definitely some politics that are involved in promoting and maintaining some of these wineries' prominence and funding. I spoke to the importer of these wines, Carlos, a bit about this, and he's saying, look, Erdogan's anti-secular agenda has really hurt the wine industry in Turkey, because it's very, very difficult to become a small producer. It's not a place where you can just go, I've got some money, have a few acres, I'm just gonna go start a winery. I'm just gonna give it a shot. It's not entirely feasible, which could contrast that with a place like Greece, or if for those of you who are with us for our last live Zoom tasting for our previous club, the wines of Dacia. So in Eastern Europe, you see a lot of these small producers who are really gaining prominence, who are really gaining regard from international markets, even though they may only be a few acres, 2, 3, 4, 5 acres, but they're really kind of able to be supported by not only whether it's the EU or whether it's their own country, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, they're being supported. In Turkey, it's not the case unless you're one of these established kind of old guard wineries. So it's something that we would love to see change. I'm sure there are actually wineries there that are either unsanctioned or they're just so small and they happen to kind of get through. But on the international market, you really can't find a lot of these sort of smaller new wave producers, because only about I think it's about 5% of Turkey's wines are exported. There's not very much that's leaving the country, though. Each year, year over year, it is going up.
It's one of the world's largest grape producers too, which is really interesting.
It is, yeah. It's one of the world's largest grape producers. A lot of it is table grapes. They still produce a large amount of table grapes, but they actually do produce a huge amount of wine relative to domestic consumption, and also considering that the government is essentially opposed to new wineries. It's really not a friendly landscape for wineries.
I'm getting an update through our Twitter feed that we've just been banned in Turkey. That's okay.
We are no longer allowed in the country. Well, we may actually be able to go there next year. Actually, we have a friend who's getting married in Istanbul. So I'm actually hoping that we actually can get there, maybe make some local connections, and actually hopefully prove myself wrong, and be able to find some small kind of smaller wineries, hopefully get in touch with some folks in the food and wine industry there.
Sure,
that would be very exciting. But
we had that experience in Georgia, all the places we've traveled, right? I mean, there's no substitute for being on the ground and then and you've had that experience. Obviously, you've traveled extensively in France, and you know everything from the bottom up, the garagistes to the big houses. Yeah.
When you're having a glass somewhere, you just meet someone and you say, I can't tell you the amount of times where I would be sitting in a little wine bar in a small town in France and say, oh, well, I love these wines. And some guy would say, oh, you like those wines? Let me call them up. Here, I'll call them up on my cell phone. You want to go see them tomorrow? That sort of thing. And I think from what I understand in Turkey, there's a bit of that kind of clandestine sort of element to it, where it's like, okay, you want to go see some wineries, that sort of thing, some cool wineries. But I mean, obviously some of these are very large commercial operations, but yes, I think it's something that hopefully with potentially with regime change or something like that in Turkey, there might be there might be some developments in the wine scene. I mean, obviously my politics are obviously all wine influenced, so it's but yeah, so it's something that we'll see where Turkey goes. It's very interesting to contrast with a place like Greece, where Greece is full on supporting their young producers. There's really a lot of support there, and Turkey's like, we're not sure if we want this. But yeah, this wine is it's just a lovely versatile rosé, though. It's lal means garnet, by the way. Actually, had to look that up and run the word through Google Translate, because they don't actually have it on their website. In terms of what some of the names actually mean. So means garnet, and it's just a nice kind of medium full body rosé. A lot of watermelon, a lot of peach, a lot of kind of that kind of sort of sweet strawberry sort of tones to it, and
absolutely
perfect for summer.
And it's initially on the palate it tastes what I would think like a little sweet, but then it disappears. It's not like this cloying sweetness of any kind. It's a sort of powdered
ripeness and a kind of richness to it.
Exactly.
Don't we have some watermelon out the back? We should have been pairing out with the watermelon.
A little watermelon melon prosciutto. That'd be a great pairing for this wine. Yeah.
Melon.
Well, we've got one more wine here tonight that we'll finish up. This is the second of the bonus wines, if you will, of wines that we absolutely fell in love with, that we could not say no to.
These are so tough. I mean, it really is like a Sophie's choice. And if you guys get a sense, there's a lot of hand wringing, and but I mean, this was why we include them. We just can't pass up on these guys. And this next wine, our final wine of the lineup, is no exception. So this wine comes to us. We're going to travel now to Crete.
So good.
And Crete, of course, right? Those of you who've been following along, has a tremendously deep and rich history of winemaking. I mean, going back as early as 4,000 4,000 years ago. We've talked about Crete a lot. Some of you might have actually received our Wines of Crete, Isle of the Gods, where we went into this in great depth. There's evidence of Cretan winemaking, both in text and also in archaeology, pretty much dating to the Minoan period of around 2500 to 2000 BCE. It's actually a wonderful in Vathipetros near the famous city of Knossos. A fully intact wine press was discovered with wine pips. They're actually able to do all kinds of wonderful chemical analysis, and they were actually at that time using a strain of native varietal that was closer to not Vitis vinifera, but like Vitis vinifera sylvestris, right? Which is a native, more native wild grape. And we've gotten into that in detail in our intro to ancient wines. But this wine is fantastic because it's a natural wine that comes to us from Domaine Paterianakis. See, now this is the problem with doing the final wine, because
right on the
then
screen there.
it is. Paterianakis. This is a 2008 blend of Kotsifali and Mandilaria. That actually T was just speaking about before. It's a beautiful wine. It comes to us from a third generation, the third generation of a family that's been making wine in Crete. And the first to actually introduce natural winemaking to the island. They're the very first to actually do organic, and they actually say they're biodynamic. I was trying to do a little bit of research on that because biodynamic and organic are two separate things, right? So if you have organic wines, of course, we're talking about not using synthetic chemical fertilizers or pesticides, right? All natural. But biodynamic means something quite different. Some of you might be familiar with, and tying it back to Demeter, Demeter certified wines, which are biodynamic wines, which actually involve not just organic processes, but also, a lot of different vinification processes. I'm thinking of Ryan, burying horns in the corn.
Yeah, so there's a series they call the 500 series for biodynamics, and you can look it up. There's some of them are a little bit more esoteric, shall we say, than others, where it's such as doing things with making tisanes from certain herbs and things like that, where it's really more like homeopathic sort of viticulture is how you might describe it, where it's hard to measure the effect. With the 500 series, I believe 501 is technically where you take cow horns, hollowed out cow horns, you fill them with dung in the fall or the winter, and then you bury them, and you dig them up in the spring, and then that dung you use then as essentially as fertilizer in the vineyard. So things like that are a little bit more maybe a little more rustic, but they actually weren't developed thousands of years ago. These are things that were developed in the 1920s by Negranos named Rudolf Steiner. So yeah, definitely some esoteric stuff there.
Totally. And I mean, we've got root days, we've got vine days, but the thing is, right, when you taste these wines side by side, time and time again, they do produce higher quality wines. Now, is that because of the horn? Probably not. It's actually because you're performing ritual, right? And this is what this club is about. It's ritual. It's about paying attention. It's about commemoration. And if you're paying attention when you're making your wine, you're going to be making a better wine, right? So that's I think part, and this certainly plays out in this glass. This is a delicious wine. It is a blend of Kotsifali and Mandilaria as well. It's a blend, as T was talking, Mandilaria is a blending grape. It's a lighter body. It gives a little bit of lift to the Kotsifali, which is, gives the wine its darker hue. It's typically a bit higher in alcohol, produces more sugar, and really imparts the flavor that this wine comes out of. It's I'm not getting a lot of oak. I mean, it's neutral oak. It's actually, it's neutral oak in these big French barrique barrels, harvested in early September. But a wine that just really is just an all-rounder that we just really, really enjoyed. The two winemakers, Emanuela and Nikki Paterianakis, have taken over this tradition, and they're actually updating a lot of the winemaking that's happening now, and the result is just something that's clean, delicious. A lot of times we think about natural wines as being funky or having, Brettanomyces or other different aspects of it. This is just a clean, amazing product.
It says on the label, a pure Cretian blend.
A pure
which
Cretian.
I just love it. I mean, just from a marketing standpoint, looking at that and just calling that out, I think this is wonderful.
Totally.
Yeah, we've really been. I mean, we've discovered some really extraordinary wines out of Crete. I mean, through our different clubs that have involved Crete, and
they've had a long time to
exception.
practice, and and these current productions are just beautiful. On the nose, I get a lot of ripe boysenberry, leather, cinnamon, dried mountain herbs. And what's nice is there's some fine tannins to this too. You could have this with hummus, lamb kebabs, with like mint chimichurri, maybe something like that would be, I mean, just stellar. Tomato and wine dishes, that kind of stuff. So it's just made to order. It's ready to go.
It really strikes me because this is a wine that, I mean, it's definitely got some deeper, darker color to it. It has like a kind of purpley sort of core, but on the palate, it's not heavy. It's not, like it's one of these brooding, dark, inky sort of wines, despite its color. So it's a little deceptive in that way, where you look at it and you're going to be, oh boy, this is going to be something that's like rich and kind of like really, stick to the bones. It actually has a lot of lift, a lot of energy to this wine. And that's something that, a lot of times when you're talking about biodynamic wines and organics. And so this is something that, it's totally debatable. And this is one of those, long conversations about why, and is it measurable, these sort of things. But they talk about, with biodynamics and with organic wines, having energy to them and life to it. And this is a wine that you taste it and you can really kind of just feel that lively sort of nature on the palate. What I would describe it as it's just great acidity. There's a lot of well integrated acidity to this wine. It's something that you can kind of feel a little bit of that tang, a little of that prickle of acidity, which kind of also lifts out that fruit as well. And so to not let it get too dark.
Yes, it's great.
That integration is, a lot of times you get pounded over the head with, individual aspects of a wine. And I think that's the thing about natural winemaking. Everything is really, really integrated. It's smooth, and certainly this is no exception to that. So
and it has that same kind of long finish we were talking about with Limnio. It just kind of lingers with you. It's deliciousness.
Well, I think
that wraps up our 5 wine flight for the night. So all 5 of these wines are for sale individually. We can ship everything to you within the next couple of weeks, or if you need us to hold it for any weather-related reasons or anything like that, travel, whatever, we're happy to do that. For tonight, we and all of you who Ancient Wine Club members will get a 15% discount off of anything you purchase tonight. We're happy to also answer any questions about any of the other wines as well. At this point, what we're going to do next is open it up here. But I just wanted to just make sure that if you're interested in any of these wines, that you're able to get them, and they're all available.
Yeah, just shoot us an email, the usual email, info@ancientwineguys.com. Do we have a Ty, do you want to flip the slide? So if we have we're not going anywhere. So if you have any questions, I'm not sure if the mic's working for people. The easiest thing might be we might just throw it into the chat.
Or we can either put it in the chat if you want to type a question. Otherwise, we'll just take a quick moment here and we can take a look and see if we can get the audio figured out here. So that'd be great to be able to chat, to hear you guys.
Feel free to unmute yourselves as well.
Okay. If it's something where you're muted, but let's see here if we can get the audio settings. And might be up there. And if you go on to,
I think Eloise is unmuted. Hi, Eloise. How are you doing?
Yep. Hi there. I'm okay. I'm unmuted.
Can't hear anybody quite yet. So if you go to let's go to audio.
Mike, I think you're live now.
Yeah,
I can see you guys. We can't hear anybody yet. So hold on one moment here.
We could just the microphone on the computer.
Yes. Because I think what it's trying to do is it's trying to play through that. We need to change the audio to come out from the computer instead of out through the microphone.
Let's just take the mic out and see if it works.
Let's see if we can just. Let's see here. Let's see if we can hear any of you guys here.
Hello.
Hey there.
There we go.
Hey, Mike. How's it going? We got you. Sorry about the beginning there. We were really, the screen locked out, the computer died. It was sort of a
Perfect storm.
perfect storm of everything. So thanks for hanging in there with us. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'd like to compliment you on these 3 wines. These were really enjoyable.
Oh, it's great. Great to hear.
Yeah. The second one, the initial nose was a little off-putting, but it didn't take long, as you mentioned.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. Like I know I've kind of come to expect that too. We all have that. You like I said, it's kind of a precursor to something really cool. Oftentimes, where you get that kind of barnyardy effect. Like, okay, when this blows off, this is going to be, there's going to be real character on the wine, and that's what we were actually, when we were kind of getting things going, we were going to mention at the beginning that if you're going to drink the Limnio tonight, you should open it up now. And then obviously we have the pictures, so we get to say that. I'm glad you.
Perfect sense. Yeah.
The pitches were totally intentional to let the Limnio breathe.
That's
That was
right.
that was really the intention
Yeah.
of all the technical difficulties. But no, I mean, it is a little. I would definitely describe that one as like rustic. It's something that has that kind of. I mean, it blows off, like we said.
Yeah.
And like when I first smelled it, I was like, wow, this wine seems to be much older than it is. It's 2017.
Right.
It's a relatively young wine, but you smell it has this kind of almost like secondary, tertiary, like, oh, this might be like a 10, 15-year-old wine. But then, when you go to taste it on the palate, there's still so much of that kind of fresh, kind of wild strawberry and black tea sort of stuff going on. It's a really compelling wine, really unique.
It was also interesting when I was pouring it. It distinctly looked kind of yellow, orange, brown color, but in the glass, it's a nice deep purple.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that brickish color that Jeff was mentioning there. Yeah, so there's definitely that kind of that propensity for essentially that's the anthocyanins, which are like the color containing molecules in the wine. So some grapes, they just those molecules tend to oxidize a little bit faster. So like Jeff mentioned, Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, these are grapes that, if you're ever playing the blind tasting game and someone gives you a wine that, that has those kind of like brickish sort of tones around the edge there when you're looking at it, and you don't suspect it to be a very, very old wine, because maybe, the friend that you're blind tasting with didn't, spend hundreds of dollars on some fancy Bordeaux or something like that. You can kind of guess that there's definitely a good chance that it could be a Nebbiolo Sangiovese, but obviously, I mean, if someone brings a Limnio to a blind tasting, you might,
mistake it.
Yeah, you might mistake it for something else, and you might, give them an elbow for, pulling up if you're trying to actually guess it correct. So
Yeah, it would be a mean selection for a blind tasting.
yeah.
So the only one I've had a chance to try so far is the Greek one, and I mean the one from Crete, and I really loved it.
You like it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Paterianakis.
Mhm.
I think that was a beautiful wine.
That's a gorgeous wine.
Yeah, I'm just trying it for the first time tonight. I didn't get to taste it with the guys, and Ryan and I were just kind of looking at each other because wow, this is just
Stellar.
It's
amazing.
definitely
Yeah, it's really good.
firing on all cylinders, as we sometimes say. I mean, that it's
Yeah.
funny how sometimes you open a bottle and sometimes you go, okay, yeah, it's really good. And other times you open the same bottle you maybe had 2-3 times. And I drank a bottle of this a week ago, and it was really nice. But tonight, there's Jeff and I just like smelled it and looked at each other like, wow. I mean, Dana was speaking, but I was, it's like it was clear that that wine was really.
Maybe it was
Really
Dana's
shiny.
mellifluous voice. combined
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
smoke.
No, I'll take no credit. No, I mean, but really, I think again, we're talking about natural wine. This is an experience I think that each of us have had. When you try these things. Our time in Georgia, having natural wines, these cleverly fermented wines, it's something that, like Ryan was saying, that sense of like electricity, that sense of you drinking something that's alive and fresh, energy. And, it's hard to describe, but this wine's got it. And there's also kind of a youthful exuberance to these 2 young ladies that have taken over the winery, leading an esteemed house into a new.
They're daughters of the previous generation. Okay, so this generation for the Paterianakis is it's the 2 daughters.
Yeah,
that's
that's
great.
Manuela and Nikki Paterianakis.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they're just killing it.
So where does Retsina fit into the picture of all this?
Well, that's a great question, because we covered Retsina in our initial presentation that we put together now like 3 or 4 years ago, 4 years ago probably. a history of wine in the ancient world, and we talked about how in ancient, very ancient Greece, they used to line the amphorae, the vessels that the wine was starting with pits,
Yeah.
resin. So that's where that flavor came in, and it was kind of it just stayed in Greece as a kind of novelty. People thought, that it, I guess it was familiar. So like, in Hawaii we eat a lot of Spam, and I mean it's just sort of like something that's familiar, and you just kind of stick with it. But yeah, it's definitely then it became associated with just kind of cruises and this familiar taste, and but I think it's still there. We used it, and it has a it kind of has that, I think, that place in the culture. But what's exciting is that now, as the guys have been saying, Greek wine is no longer associated with that, because I think you tell people of a certain generation, oh, I'm drinking a Greek wine, and that's kind of what comes to mind, is that whether you like it or you don't like it, there's an association with it. But now it's like there's all this crazy, cool, exciting, new wine and progressive wine and things like that coming out. So
It's
yeah,
neat. It's neat that tradition has continued.
yeah,
too,
it is.
right?
Good. Yeah.
In the sense
It goes well with the food.
Yeah,
sure.
it can be delicious. Honestly, we had the Fritzina that we used in our event. We loved it. It was a really good Ritzina.
some Ritzinas can taste like pine sol. I mean, but
Yeah, pine sol.
those are the ones that they give a bad name to, I think, a really good thing. In the sense that, I mean, this is a tradition that goes back, not even to Greece, but even earlier. Right? So actually, we have amphora from the 18th dynasty in Egypt that were coated in terebinth resin, right? Which is similar to and so these resonated wines have a tremendously long lineage in the Mediterranean, going back as far as like 15 BCE. So
BC, like even before, longer than 4,000 years.
you're looking at about 3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with Ritzina, there's definitely some producers who are trying to kind of reimagine it and say, okay, maybe we can have a little bit of this, but not have it be the dominant element of the wine. And so I've definitely had some wines from some producers who they're trying to not completely do away with it, but they're trying to maybe tone it down or see what a new kind of revisionist take on Ritzina could be for a modern wine. I think it's exciting, and actually Ritzina, I always like to kind of talk about Ritzina as like part of a bigger conversation about where wine can go with. I mean, so you have pine resin in wine, like why not other things and still make a good wine? And this is a deep conversation where the beer camps, the beer people, they've been putting fruit and spices and all these things in wine, in beer for a long time. And wine kind of had this sort of bug about sort of being this purity element of it. That's what's a real wine. And you can have these Ritzinas that can be very complex, very compelling, very beautiful wines that they have pine resin in them. And so it really starts the discourse about, okay, well, could you make a wine that was that was spiced or something like that, or had some other elements, whether it was pine resin.
What about a Chinato?
I was just going to say. So last night we had a wine that it's a Vino Chinato, which is a wine that has traditionally had the bark of the quina, the bush or tree shrub. And it's an incredible wine. It's a beautiful wine. It's almost more akin to like a red vermouth or something like that, and it's just a little bit sweet, and then fortified. But these are wines that why can't we talk about them in the same breath as a Grand Cru Burgundy or as a really great Bordeaux or Champagne? Because there's no reason that you couldn't make something that was sublime that wasn't 100% pure grapes.
Well, the problem too is that oftentimes as you go down that path and you start doing this blending, it becomes an excuse, in some cases, to hide flaws in wine. Right, it's quality actually degrades, and then you end up in a situation, right, where blended wines or wines that are fortified end up tasting really bad because the ingredients are not good, and they're actually substituting things and adding things that just don't taste good. And you have the reputation of, say, a fortified wine that just doesn't do it. So I think there's ample space for a renaissance that would actually use good wine, good ingredients, and bring back some of these blends that we see in the Roman Empire as well. Right?
Well, the Romans put everything you could possibly imagine into their wine to try to mask just bad winemaking, basically. And oxidation. So you get sawdust thrown in there, and you get every spice imaginable. So yeah, the historian Pliny the Elder just has lists and lists of different ingredients that were tried to try to. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Retsina. You develop that becomes part of the character of the wine, and then the consumer comes to expect that flavor.
Right.
Sawdust wine, whatever. Like
What does a restaurant do with
Yeah.
bad wines? They make sangria, right? I mean,
Or vinegar, or red wine vinegar.
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying all these things to add, not to mention water.
Yeah.
One of like a wine trend that's been kind of coming up just in the last couple of years that we've seen is this concept of piquette. And piquette is a French word for, well, I mean, I believe it comes from it means a little drink, but it comes from the verb picoler, which means kind of to drink, as into like we're going drinking tonight, that kind of thing. But piquette is a oats wine hybrid that you make with essentially like the leftover grape juice, leftover grape skins and stems and seeds, and you press that and you get the juice off, and you would never make wine with, I should say traditional wine. But you add water to that. You're essentially running water through the pomace, the grape skin, stems, and seeds, and there's still a good amount of sugars in there, and the sugar sugary wine water that comes off of that, you then ferment that, and so you're getting these piquettes that are about 7 to 9% alcohol. They're nowhere near where you would actually be able to legally call them wine, but they're gaining in popularity. Some of them are quite terrible. I'm just going to say it. Some of them are definitely drinkable, and kind of the beer of wine sort of mindset. We go, okay, it's drinkable, but
Or like seltzer water. Some of them are even slightly carbonated.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they're seltzer water. Like again, say what you will about the complexity or the noble nature of a White Claw hard seltzer or something like that. It's something that people enjoy, regardless of like what our opinions are about it. People like it,
Right.
and for wineries, they're like, wow, I have a whole new product, something I would just throw away. Normally, you just put out in the dump it in the in the vineyard as like kind of makeshift fertilizer. Now they're bottling and selling it, and it's essentially just wine water.
It's like wine bycatch.
It's exactly like wine bycatch, and it's interesting. Like I think it's sustainable at the very least, but it is
Less
something.
wasteful.
Huh?
Less wasteful.
It's less wasteful, maybe we should say. I don't know if I'd say it's sustainable if they're putting it in glass bottles, but it's less wasteful. But yeah, it all begs the bigger question of like, is this valid? Is this a valid beverage? And yeah, it's an interesting discussion. You want to say, okay, it has pine resin in it. It's not wine. Well,
Well, it's rooted in tradition.
Exactly. How many great culinary traditions came out of that?
Yeah.
Like into all.
Are there levels of quality of Retsina, the way sake has different levels of quality?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, I mean there are. If you mean in terms of like levels of quality, in terms of like an official sort of like with sake, where you have like in my in terms of level of polishing of the grain for sake. I don't believe there's any designated like official quality tiers for Retsina where you have like a Grand Cru Retsina or something like that. I don't believe.
Yeah.
I don't think that they've really kind of delved into making some sort of hierarchy for it.
Really good question.
It's a great question. It's something that I will actually ask our Greek importer because I'm very curious to know kind of where the regulatory bodies are going with Retsina. Because you can buy Retsina, but you don't really see like Retsina. Where it's not going to say, oh, this is a Retsina from. I mean, it'll say where the winery is from or something like that. But there's no like Retsina appellations necessarily. Where it's like hey, the Retsina from this island is better than all the other Retsinas, or it's unique from the other, distinct from the other Retsinas. You just say, oh, it's Retsina of this grape and it's grown in this place, but you don't see like a Retsina appellation necessarily. And I'm curious if there's any movement on that or not. Yeah, it would be smart for them to say, hey, our Retsina from Kefalonia or from Rhodes or from Nemea is different from other places, and it's actually yes, it's Retsina, but it's actually we use this type of pine tree, we use this type of grapes, and we make it in these types of barrels, and it's different. And I think it'd be very smart to do that from a marketing standpoint.
Totally. Yeah. But you kind of need your competitors to also have the same sort of oppositional structure to create that conversation, right?
That's right.
Somebody's got to kind of take a stand and start that conversation, and somebody else will say, well, actually, in Rhodes, we use a different barrique. like blending process, and it's going to be, and then everybody makes money.
Yeah, but these things take time. I mean, wine regulatory bodies, in my experience, are some of the most rooted, difficult, intransigent political bodies in all of commerce that I've ever encountered. I mean, they're so hesitant, depending on the country, but for the most part, in general, they're very, very hesitant to make big sweeping changes, and when they do, it's significant, because there's kind of this, it's wine, it's rooted in history, it's rooted in tradition. It's not something like some more modern product. It's really something that I think these countries understand has cultural heritage and cultural capital assigned to it. For example, in France, there's probably a 60-70 year debate about whether or not to add certain vineyards, and vineyards that are they're the size of the house and yard here that we're doing this tasting from. They're small vineyards, whether or not to add these vineyards to a Premier Cru vineyard or add them to a certain village's appellation. These are again like fierce debates that there's some scandals about bribery, and no, I want to get my half acre into this appellation, and it's hasn't resolved in 60, 70, 80 years, and so it's one of those things where I hope maybe Greece can say, hey, let's move, let's keep developing some of these appellations. But I don't ever hold my breath for wine regulations to move quickly.
Yeah.
The next Red Sea revolution. Once we kill something, that's when you're going to see this kind of differentiation happening.
Yeah, you kind of have to learn from the importer of Retsina, and I remember once we tasted with this same importer, Karasi, who showed us 2 Retsinas, and one was a nicer Retsina, and the difference between the nicer one and the less nice one, the cheaper one, was that the nicer one, they use actual pine resin. Versus the cheaper one, I think, used some synthetic. Pine sol. Yeah. Maybe
if memory serves, it came in a gasoline can.
It tasted like 10. It's more than 2.
Yeah.
That was a rough day.
Out the other ones, there were some truly vile ones that we tried, but I think he just wanted to kind of give us a couple of those, so the one that we chose tasted really good.
Tears are rolling down the eyes.
Yeah, and so sometimes some of the most memorable and fun wine experiences are the wines that are terrible. I like that Agiorgitiko Cabernet Sauvignon, Greece Napa blend that it was not Napa, actually, it was California Cabernet, so it's probably from who knows where. But I remember tasting that one. I was like, wow, this is really truly awful, and I really wish it had never been made. But I'm very glad that I had tasted it, because it was very educational, it was informative. It taught me a lot about business decisions at that time in terms of what people will spend money on. And I didn't know that you could just put fermented grape juice in a large plastic bladder, stick it on a boat, ship it over someplace, and you could just roll it up to a winery. And it was very eye-opening about kind of showing how the sausage is made, so to speak, of certain wines. And you think, okay, if they can do this, what else can they do? And then you learn more about both wine and some of these other types of wines that really can kind of go, oh, that's what that is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Great question. Does anyone have anything else burning? Any other burning
Answer any questions?
I can't think of anything else. On that first wine, you mentioned the Yakut. You mentioned something about Alicante Boucher. So what was that?
Yeah, so the primary 2 grapes for the Yakut are Öküzgözü and Bogazkere. There also is a little bit of Alicante Boucher and Carignan. Both French grapes. So Alicante Boucher, you don't really see it in France very much. You actually see it more on the Iberian Peninsula. You see it a lot used as kind of a blending grape to give color. It's a small percentage of the Yakut. It's again probably one of those holdouts from Kavaklidere. They're a large winery. They I know they make Syrah, and they make some of these international varieties as well. Something that I'm personally not super interested in their international varieties. And this is the Yakut is primarily Öküzgözü and Bogazkere, but
Alicante Boucher is you see it all over the place. It's almost never a single variety. You do see it occasionally. As Portugal, actually, Spain, you'll see it as single varieties from vineyards that done interesting things with it. It's a grape that has, again, a lot of dark color. I believe it's a Teinturier, which means it's a grape that the juice is red. The juice actually has color, not just the skins.
I was just gonna ask that question.
Yeah, akin to
because I think isn't Öküzgözü also one of those two grapes also?
well, I think Bogazkere
Bogazkere has a red skin, so that's kind of cool.
Like
little-
Saparavi.
Yeah.
right,
Saparavi.
like the Georgian Saparavi.
Very rare, but they're out there.
Yeah, so when the flesh is red and then the skin is also red, then oftentimes Alicante Boucher is used to blend with lighter grapes to give a darker color, because you're getting darker color from the juice and from the skin.
Yeah. Because most of the time, I mean, let's say you make wines like this rosé. This is if you look at the grapes for the Karasi on the vine, they're dark grapes. You know, you're just only letting the juice and the skin sit in contact for a little bit. You know, the juice of most red grapes is color. It doesn't have any color. So, but yeah, for Alicante Boucher, it's something you can use it as like almost like a tool. A lot of times in a lot of vineyards, they'll just have a few percent of it that they just kind of they blend in to have a little bit extra color.
Yeah.
Like 5% or something like that.
Yeah, like 5 or less a lot of times. Like,
Yeah.
it's like in Bordeaux, you'll see like Petit Verdot usually takes this role as well. Petit Verdot and Malbec traditionally in Bordeaux is used as for blending for deeper color and for structure. Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
The alarms went off.
Any comments on age worthiness of the first 3 wines anyway?
Sorry, any comments? What was that?
How age worthy, how well they'll age over time?
I'll just do the first one and you can go down the line here. So yeah, for the first one, for the Yakuts, I would definitely say I would drink it within 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 years max. But like, I mean, I would say it's probably going to show best, and what the wine wants to be is a kind of a juicier, younger, fresher sort of wine. It's something that if you were to age it, some of that kind of like fun, bouncy blueberry, blackberry fruit that kind of has so much kind of youth and vibrancy to it. It's gonna mellow out. It's gonna drop out, and you get more of the kind of peppery, sort of floral, sort of tones just remaining. As far as and I think it has enough structure though, definitely to hold up for 4 or 5 years and improve. After that, it's not going to improve. It's not necessarily going bad. It's just not going to continue improving. I would say drink it within 1 to 4 years. Would be kind of my sweet spot for the wine. Just based on how it's made and based on the structure. And
yeah, I mean the Limnio is one of those wines. I mean, I talked a lot about just the similarity with Nebbiolo, and I would say Nebbiolo is one of the great aging wines of the world. Obviously, I mean you can sit on Nebbiolo for 30, 40 years. The Limnio, I mean, it's the Limnio is there's a lot of these kind of Greek wines which we don't know for sure, right? Because they're the tradition there, this kind of modern winemaking tradition. We don't have 30, 40-year-old Limnio that was made in a high quality way to tell, but just based on the characteristics of the wine, the high, the relatively high acidity and the relatively high tannin, those are the two things we've mentioned before that kind of help a wine age. And so this wine, this Limnio is drinking wonderfully now, but I think easily 10, 15 years you can hold on to that wine, and I think it'd be really interesting to see where it is. I mean, it'd be really interesting to see where it is. I think it's again, just with all that overlap with the Nebbiolo, I think it would be a cool wine to see in like 10 years. Exactly.
I would imagine it would definitely get like that.
Yeah,
Good
so it's going to be great, get all that kind of mushroomy quality and that little bit of that tar that kind of stays in there. I think it would be delicious if we have the patience to sit on it. So
The Paterianakis is a natural wine. They say actually the vineyard actually says it can be laid down for up to 6 years, but I think this is a 2018 that we've sent out. I would drink it now. I wouldn't wait another 3 years because I think it's just perfect.
it's in that's in
Yeah, it's beautiful. I totally forgot.
are these all natural ones?
No, just this one. I think.
So natural again. It's like natural meaning kind of like in terms of like a minimal.
Like pet, yeah.
Sorry.
Someone, one of the wine column people in Davis called the natural wines pet nat.
Oh, okay.
I
So again, you can make a pet nat in a natural sort of style. Pet nat actually stands for pétillant naturel, which basically means naturally sparkling. So it's a wine that has a single fermentation bottle, right? And so when we say kind of saying natural here, we're saying it's really more of it's a wine that in this case it's organically farmed, it's uncertified biodynamically farmed. It's something that really minimal intervention in the vineyard, but also in the winemaking. You're not trying to manipulate the alcohol level, the sugar level, the color, the aromatics. You're not adding in all these sort of things in the cellar as like some sort of additive. So very very kind of hands-off winemaking is really kind of where natural winemaking sort of lands. I mean, I would definitely say as well, like the Anatolikos Limnio could definitely fall under natural winemaking.
You could call that a natural wine.
It's 100% organic, certified organic. The eMeis as well is also would fall in that sort of natural wine sort of style. It's natural wine is not like a hard and fast definition that you can really say this is, that isn't. I mean, in terms of like in terms of a lot of critics or writers, a lot of people, they're on like I'll know it when I see it sort of basis, where it's not entirely defined by a certain process necessarily,
or a governing body,
or a governing body.
So for example, organic,
Right.
or biodynamic, Demeter certified.
Right. So this one, so I misspoke. Yeah, in the sense that that's just the only natural one is absolutely. These other ones would qualify, but you do have these governing bodies like Demeter, which we mentioned, and this one as well that hold to a set of some.
For biodynamic principles for Demeter. And then for
this one's actually kind of interesting. One way actually when you actually see Demeter and you actually see this one, I forgot to mention actually with this with Paterianakis. The name is actually Melisokipos, which actually in Greek means Melissa is bee and Kipos is garden, so it's the bee garden. And so you see actually this bee iconography like on the label. Demeter uses it too, and what it refers to is actually this garden, or the vineyards are left to kind of grow a little bit wild, and oftentimes there are bees that are pollinating and part of the ecosystem, and it's part of biodynamic winemaking as well. So you'll see that with Demeter, you'll see that with wines like this as well. So it's a very cool label, So look out for bees. You'll see that.
And then just to finish up Mike's question, would you speak to the eMeis in terms of aging potential?
Yeah, but especially I wouldn't age the eMeis too much, just because it's meant to be drunk fresh, and bright, and so you're gonna lose as you age wine. It's almost this curve where you're gonna get some tertiary flavor, but the fruit drops. So there's usually, depending on the wine, there's this happy medium, right, where you both have fruit and develop some tertiary flavor. Some people like more tertiary flavors, some people like more fruit. I mean, it depends on your taste, but for carbonically macerated wines, I wouldn't recommend them the age. And if you look at this wine, it's actually a screw top wine. And the reason they do that is they don't want air coming in to the wines, because because corks are semi-permeable, right? And so as air comes in, that's how like the slow process of aging of wine occurs. But this is a screw top, it's completely airtight. So the winemaker wants you to not age it and drink it young, and he doesn't want air to come into it and age it unintentionally.
Perfect.
Well, guys, we want to really thank you for joining us for the Goddess and the Grape, for the wines of Demeter. We're really so happy to have Jeff in place here. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for the great wines.
Thank you.
We will see you in 2 months' time.
Yeah, thanks for all the support.
Thanks for your support.
In the meantime, cheers. Take care of yourselves.
Cheers.
Happy.
Bye.
See you very soon.
We'll see you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Great weekend.
Thank you.
Cheers.